Are you struggling to manage your blood sugar despite following a conventional approach? Have you tried many diets but still cannot seem to get diabetes under control? Do you want to discover a data-driven, personalized approach to addressing the root causes of diabetes? My name is Gamden, founder of Wellness Impact and host of the Thriving with Diabetes podcast. We empower people with type 2 diabetes to achieve diabetes remission and prevent complications, helping them live healthier, happier, and longer lives. In this episode, Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer, a functional medicine physician, join us. Together, we explore functional medicine, nutrition, gut health, and weight gain as a symptom. We hope you find this discussion helpful for diabetes, overall health, and longevity. Enjoy this episode, subscribe, and follow us for more expert tips or strategies to thrive with diabetes. Dr. Jessie, welcome to the Thriving with Diabetes podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you in your community, Gamden.
Great to have you today with us. Let's start talking about functional medicine. And functional medicine takes a more holistic approach to health, focusing on the root causes or cause of illness rather than just addressing symptoms. Can you explain how functional medicine differs from traditional approaches in managing health conditions like diabetes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, functional medicine does seek to identify and address the root cause of diseases and symptoms, and that does include diabetes. And beyond that, functional medicine also works within a whole body paradigm, meaning that a systems biology approach, it acknowledges that all of our body is connected. It's not to say that there aren't times when seeing a specialist isn't appropriate, right? Certainly there's times to see a specialist, whether it's a GI doctor or an endocrinologist, or an orthopedic surgeon, right? All of these people and specialties certainly have their place, but in functional medicine, we're looking at how the body is interacting, how all the systems are interacting, rather than putting them in silos. So we're looking at how your liver is impacting your diabetic state, how your microbiome is impacting your diabetic state, how your production of neurotransmitters might be affecting your diabetic state. So these are just different examples of how we're looking at the whole of the body and seeking to gather gems to support your body's healing from, through addressing the root cause imbalances and disturbances.
And the word functional means to function.
Yes, exactly. Restoring function is what we're seeking to do.
Brilliant. Very interesting, because usually we hear this term functional medicine, but sometimes we might think it's about medications only. But as you highlighted now, you focus on the root causes of a health condition, and you mentioned that our body works together, or every organ in the body works or connected to another organ, and they work together. If one is impacted, the other will suffer. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. And, to say a little bit more about that, right? There are times when I'm working with someone where I see inflammation, like chronic, long-term elevated inflammation is playing a role in their symptoms or challenges, whether it's around diabetes or struggling to lose weight, or recurrent illness, keep getting infections. Inflammation would play a role in these and many other things. So, for example, there are times where for an individual, we come to see that root of that inflammation, why, getting curious about why is this body really stuck in this inflammatory cycle that's, perpetuating the diabetic state or making it really, really difficult to lose weight or, whatever the case may be. And we find that it's given by the challenges their liver is encountering, right? So stress on the liver. And when we address that, the inflammation resolves itself. Now, there are other times where we might find the source of that inflammation is really happening in their microbiome. And so we address that and the inflammation resolves itself. So, it takes some, like peeling of the onion to look at, okay, what is impacting or leading to the current disease state or the symptoms or the conundrums someone is dealing with, and continuing to kind of go down that path to understand how we can support the body in healing.
Before you continue watching or listening to this episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to book a call. If you are looking for personalized support to manage diabetes effectively and take control of your health, visit wellnessimpact.org to schedule your call today. Back to the episode. Brilliant. Very interesting information. Thank you for sharing that. So we should sometimes we shouldn't focus too much on the symptoms, but we need to look at the root causes of a health condition. Symptoms are like a warning sign, or just when we try to deal with them, so we are not dealing with the cause.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Symptoms are a little bit like the canary in the coal mine, right? They're letting us know, we're getting a message that there's some kind of imbalance or perturbance, that there's something going on in our body that is asking for our attention. So when we notice symptoms, the thing is to start to do the detective work to understand what's the source of them.
Brilliant. Very interesting information. Thank you for sharing that. From our previous discussion, I noticed that you use lab tests and data to create a personalized strategy to overcome a health condition. So my question is, what are some of the most important tests you look into, and how do these results guide your approach?
That is a great question. And there are so many, Gamden, that I consider really important. And what I consider important is going to be different for each person. But I will, kind of knowing who's listening today, with your listeners in mind, talk about a few of the really what I consider essential lab numbers, what you might put on your personal dashboard to keep your eye on. One of them is looking at inflammation, right? And so we can look at inflammation from a lab perspective in many different ways. But I will say, for someone who is dealing with diabetes or struggling to lose weight or in pre-diabetic, some of the things we're definitely going to look at are inflammation in the way of HSCRP, which for those of you who are wondering what that means, that stands for high sensitivity C reactive protein. And I really want to see that number under 1.5. And if it's elevated, it is a fabulous point of leverage. It is like the low-hanging fruit that's going to have spiral up benefits once we get that inflammation under control. So HSCRP is one. Homocysteine, it's another marker that we can look at it a lot of different ways, but I do consider it an inflammatory marker. So we have HSCRP and homocysteine as our star inflammatory markers. Other things that I want to look at are a variety of nutrients that play a role in our body's capacity to keep our blood sugar levels stable, as well as our cravings, right? So these are things like vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. I do lab tests to figure out what those levels are at. Other things, nutrients that are going to be really important for this are things like zinc and magnesium. Magnesium, one little tip is I would encourage people to really advocate to have their magnesium levels within their red blood cells tested, as opposed to floating around in their blood or their serum, right? There are different ways we can test different nutrients, and there's not one right way across the board because different nutrients live in different places, basically. And so magnesium is one of the nutrients we want to look at inside of our red blood cells. But commonly this is tested in just like a plasma, so kind of floating around in your blood, so to speak. So my encouragement is if you ask your magnesium levels to be checked, you want it to make sure they check it within your red blood cells. And where I like to see this is at least at 5.5. So if that's low, that's going to be a really great point of leverage. You know, when it comes to diabetes or pre-diabetes or keeping our blood sugar levels stable, magnesium is a superstar nutrient in that front. Now, it's never the only thing I'm going to do, but it's really provides a foundational, kind of like a reinforcement to our system. So we want to make sure that's in optimal levels. Even looking at things like vitamin B12 and folate are really useful for different reasons. But, vitamin B12 plays an important role in our nerve health. So for anyone with diabetes, nerve health is on our mind, right? Because that's one of the things that can happen. People can have changes in sensation from diabetes. People can have their eye health at risk given by the damage to nerves. So making sure that B12 is in a hearty, healthy range, which I like to see that at about, kind of 700 or so, maybe even 800 for some people. It's often a nutrient that is commonly depleted, whether it's because someone is on an acid reflux medication, or also known as like a PPI, that will decrease your absorption of B12. Also, B12 is just a really complicated nutrient to absorb. So there are a lot of people who they're not even on an acid reducing medication. They just really struggle with that B12. And folate's a bit like a light switch for our genes. It helps turn genes on. We want to be turned on, and turn genes off. We want to be turned off. So these are some of the things that I would definitely encourage people make sure they're testing to get a kind of a more holistic view of what's going on. Again, like I said, there are many others I test beyond this, but these are some of the things that when I see people, these are rarely, it's really uncommon that these items are being tested. Almost everyone in this podcast, they're going to have their fasting glucose. They're probably getting their fasting insulin. And if not, I would definitely add that to the wish list. Hemoglobin A1C, people are going to be getting that as they should. But these are all some other things that we can bring into the data we're gathering and use it to support your body.
Brilliant. You have shared a lot of information, and we don't want people to feel overwhelmed by the information or the details that you are sharing. Very helpful. So you just shared, if we can say, the foundation of the data that you look into when you deal with clients or patients. And you mentioned inflammation, which is number one we should look at, and nutrition, craving, vitamins, and you focused on magnesium and B12 and folate. Or I think I missed one, but people can listen or watch this episode again to understand what data you look into when you work with them.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and inflammation, if we were just to kind of simplify, I'd say inflammation and nutrients, right? And as you mentioned, there's a number of different things in that nutrient, bucket that we'd want to look at. But yeah, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, zinc, B12, and folate. Those are 6 of the star-studded nutrients. But even if you just start, if you're like, oh my goodness, I am overwhelmed by that list, start with inflammation and start with vitamin D. Great place to start.
Yeah, I agree. Inflammation is could be the biggest marker we need to look at. Very interesting. Let's move on and talk about microbiome and its impact on health. Research shows that the gut microbiome plays a significant role in overall health, including metabolic conditions like diabetes. And my question is, how does our gut health affect blood sugar regulation and metabolic health?
Yeah, so a few different ways. One is our gut microbiome plays a role in the nutrients we absorb or don't. And there is a type of microbiome that actually leads to extracting more calories from food than another microbiome. And that first kind, the one that pulls more calories out of the same amount of food, that's one that we'll commonly see with people with diabetes, right? So they're actually, for the same amount of food, they're getting more calories because that microbiome is pulling more calories out of that food. Other things that we'll see that will impact, diabetes is how our microbiome either helps us feel satisfied or makes us crave. Right, so our microbiome, the different types of microbes in our colon in particular, play a role in what we would call satiety, whether we feel satisfied or not, and cravings, whether we're just can't feel full, can't feel satisfied, we keep looking for other things. And the thing about that craving thing is that more commonly, those microbes will cause us to crave things that worsen diabetes. They will cause us to crave sugar, simple carbs, things like that. So that's another way that our microbiome can affect diabetes. Our microbiome also plays an important role in our in certain nutrients, right? So in that vitamin B12 and a number of other nutrients that can either help stabilize our blood sugar or not. So, when I work with people and we believe there's something going on with their microbiome, oftentimes we'll actually do a really comprehensive microbiome assessment. So there are specialty assessments that help us really get clear on what's happening with your microbiome. The other thing that I'd say, and I imagine that some of your listeners may already be onto this, is there's a strain of bacteria called Akkermansia, tomato, that is shown to be really, really promising as it pertains to bringing down hemoglobin A1C, keeping blood sugar, bringing it down a little bit, improving insulin sensitivity. So akromansia I have seen it clinically just really play a powerful role in moving numbers. And this is some of the people who I work with are on medication, whether it's metformin or, Ozempic or something like whatever it is. And this akromansia really there's synergy between whether it's medication in the akromansia, nutritional shifts in the akromansia, or all of the above, whatever's right for the person. It really does work magic. There are a number of different products out there. Pendulum is one company. They're actually really the ones who brought akromansia to the limelight. But there are a few others that I really like. There's one that combines akromansia with green tea extract, which then really is another great place to work for its anti-inflammatory benefits and a few other things I'd say. But yeah, that is it's getting a lot of attention, and I will say rightfully so. That's not always the case. Lots of times I hear about supplements and I do the deep dive and I'm not impressed. But with this, I'm impressed with both the data as well as the outcomes I'm seeing.
Before you continue watching or listening to this episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to book a call. If you are looking for personalized support to manage diabetes effectively and take control of your health, visit wellnessimpact.org to schedule your call today. Back to the episode. Brilliant. Very interesting information. I think if people just benefit from this part is more than enough. Very interesting and helpful information. When you're saying they extract more calories, that means we will have high blood sugar levels. Is that correct?
Probably. I mean, some of it depends on what they're eating, right? So if you're eating a piece of salmon and you're simply getting more calories from that salmon, then that probably won't have a negative impact on blood sugar. But let's say it's not that, right? Whether it's white rice or ice cream or a cookie or, something like that, that's definitely the net effect of that is, yes, that will take a blood sugar that's going to naturally go up and make it even worse.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to make sure I understood this point correctly. And you mentioned satiety and cravings. And the last thing you mentioned, a type of good bacteria that can help with reducing A1C. I will find it difficult to pronounce it.
Yeah, akromansia. It's a tricky one. And that's spelled just AKKERMANSIA, akromansia. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions about that, just send me an email at we@WellEmpowered and just say that probiotic in the subject. I'll know what you're talking about. That probiotic diabetes, right? I'll know what you're talking about and I'll get back to you. But akromansia.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that information and confirming that as well. Let's talk about weight gain. I know you look at it from another point of view, which is weight gain means it's a symptom, not the cause. Can you explain how this applies to diabetes or other health condition and what factors that contribute to weight gain in people with this condition?
Yeah. In one of the things I've found in, decades of working with people in this area, and in particular in this weight mastery world, people who are committed to a whole new era where weight's just handled, there are 5 commonly overlooked causes that lead to this symptom that we would call weight gain or difficulty losing weight. And the first one we've already talked about. The first one is inflammation. So when inflammation is elevated, the body actually goes into energy conservation, also known as fat storage mode. And so again, that inflammation can be measured, and in particular, we want to measure it with that HSCRP and the homocysteine. HSCRP and homocysteine. So inflammation is number 1. Number 2 is compromised insulin sensitivity. And for your listeners, I'm sure all of you are fairly familiar with this, but the other thing I'd say about that insulin sensitivity is we actually want that insulin down around 7 or less, even though labs will say your insulin is normal when it goes as high as 18, 20, 22 in some labs. So we want to work in a more narrow range because we know that if it's 7 or less, you are really at an advantage in the way of likeliness of disease progression. So bringing down that insulin, and there are a lot of different factors that contribute to insulin sensitivity, which leads us to the next thing that plays a role in that, and that's nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies. So nutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies, omega-3 fatty acids being a big one, vitamin D being a big one, right? Some of these we've already talked about, but our nutrients play an important role in our capacity to keep our blood sugar levels stable and our ability to produce the amount of insulin our body needs, and in our ability to receive the message of insulin. So a lot of different things we can see happening there. Number 4, in the way of root causes of, like what would lead to this side effect called weight gain, is something around our detoxification pathways not working very well. I like to say detox pathways gunked up. And those detoxification pathways, the thing about it is, when we hear the word detox, mostly we think about pollutants like pesticides or, heavy metals, but even our hormones that we naturally make in our body go through our detoxification pathways. And so if those aren't flowing nicely, which can happen for a variety of reasons, if those aren't flowing nicely, the side effect will be that someone struggles to lose weight or gains weight. So those detoxification pathways are the 4th commonly overlooked cause. Number 5 is actually stress. So stress, as measured by our production of cortisol. So cortisol is our primary stress hormone. And when we produce cortisol, our body shifts into that energy conservation mode or fat storage mode. The thing about stress is some of it is emotional or psychological, right? Someone feels stressed, but there can be stress on the body that leads us to produce cortisol, which therefore leads us to store calories. So it causes us to produce cortisol that isn't, we don't feel stressed, right? And these are things like chronic infections, and also looping back to some of the other things we've already talked about. Nutrient deficiencies are a kind of stress. Detoxification pathways not working really well, an accumulation of toxins, that's a type of stress. So that 5th one, that stress is one we want to look at in many different ways.
Brilliant. Very helpful information. Every time I will say this part is better than the other one. You mentioned when we look at weight gain, we don't just look at it from the point it is a cause of. It is a cause, but it is a symptom of other issues. And you mentioned, or factors, you mentioned 5 things. Mm-hmm. Number 1, we come back to the main point, inflammation. And I think when you say compromised insulin sensitivity, you're referring to insulin resistance, right?
Insulin resistance, but I would say we want to use a more narrow range to define that. So even though like lab normal fasting insulin might go up to 18 or even 20, we want to see it at 7 or less. So that's a big difference. So they might be getting results that say, oh, my insulin is normal. I'm not insulin resistant. And what I would say is if it's above 7, you actually are.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned nutrition. And detox pathways. I'm not sure if this is related to liver issues.
It can be, but it doesn't always show up as elevated liver enzymes. In fact, I would say mostly it doesn't. So liver enzymes may be totally normal and still detoxification pathways may not be working well. Now, there are many different ways we could understand if this is at play. And some of it is a little bit too down the rabbit hole, I think, for this conversation. But from a high level, we could say, are there more toxins going in and less toxins going out? Well, how would we know that? More toxins going in, we could look at how much alcohol someone's drinking, if they're smoking cigarettes or using cannabis recreationally. Those would all be examples of toxins that are coming into the body that we have control over. And then in the way of toxins going out, simply put, how frequently are you urinating? Because that's one of the ways we get rid of our toxins. And sometimes people aren't drinking enough water to help that work very well. That's a simple solution there, right? And then on the other front, our bowel movements. So if people are not having daily healthy bowel movements, it's a suggestion or sign that they're reabsorbing toxins. There's a saying that says, we're not just what we eat, we're what we don't excrete. So if we're not getting rid of our toxins, which are urine and bowel movements, our sweat and our breath, but urine and bowel movements, those are the top 2 ways we get rid of toxins. So if we're not getting rid of them on a regular basis, that's a little tip that, oh gosh, yeah, if you're having 3-4 bowel movements in a given week, I bet your detox pathways need a little bit of help.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Great information to add to that point. The other thing I wanted to ask you about the final point you mentioned, which is stress. Are you referring to chronic stress?
Chronic stress is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. So chronic stress is typically, people know they're stressed. They feel emotionally or psychologically drained. They feel stressed. But even, eating in a way that causes our blood sugar to go up and down, right? That's a type of stress. That is a physiological stress. So we have psychological stresses and physiological stresses. And so, psychological is pretty clear. Physiological, can be a little more nuanced, but blood sugar going up and down, that's a type of stress. Toxins accumulating, that's a type of stress. A chronic infection that maybe you don't even know you have in your microbiome, for example, that's a type of stress.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that information.
Yeah.
This episode will be fully packed with helpful information and insights. Actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about hormones, what disrupts hormones and how we balance them. Can you touch a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a few different things. One is our microbiome does play a role in healthy hormones. 2 is when there's excess adipose tissue, the fancy word for fat, that actually disrupts our hormones, because when we have more fat than is ideal for our body, the fat cells themselves are going to play a role in turning testosterone into estrogen. So testosterone is going to get turned into estrogen, and people are going to end up with what's called estrogen dominance. So, this is mostly people can understand this in the way of if a man has more fat, sometimes he'll have the appearance of having breasts. That's actually not just because he has more weight, it's actually because he has more estrogen. And that those fat cells over-convert the testosterone into estrogen. I mentioned zinc. So while there are many different things we would do to address that, when someone has a zinc deficiency or insufficiency, their testosterone is going to get turned into estrogen a lot faster. So zinc helps kind of slow that down a little bit. Of course, there are other things, but that is one thing. In the way of other places, points of leverage, those some of the other nutrients we talked about that really help our body process our hormones well or detoxify our hormones well. I think about B12 with that. I think about even just making sure we're getting enough protein. Protein is really important for those pathways to run well. So there are a lot of different ways we can look at our sex hormones and see how they might be playing a role in diabetes and in weight gain. But those are some of the ones that I'd really focus on from a high level point. Now, of course, if you're someone who's going, yeah, I've been trying to lose weight. And so, okay, great. My estrogen might be high, but what do I do about it? That's when you want to circle back and, like we said, just get started with knowing what your inflammation numbers look like and get to work on that. So that's where I'd invite people to begin their deep dive in their hormones.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing this information. So one point that you mentioned is when we gain fat, that disrupts the other hormones or the hormones.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it looks like gaining fat is a big issue. It's not just about having a health condition, but it can disrupt the whole system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, beyond that, to your point, to say a little bit more, Gamden, about what that fat accumulation does to our body, it serves as a store of toxins. So fat tissue is where toxins get housed. So when someone has a high, if they're overweight or obese, clinically speaking, right, they're also probably going to have a higher toxic burden because their fat cells are storing those toxins. And so just, kind of one more way that we can cause some challenges as it pertains to diabetes or pre-diabetes. The other thing that I'd say about it is fat cells themselves are pro-inflammatory. They actually lead to kind of getting the body in this vicious cycle of inflammation. So whether it's by way of changing hormones or storing toxins or increasing inflammation, the large amounts of fat cells, big fat cells, large amounts of adipose tissue really does present a big health risk. I understand this subject can be very sensitive, and I really just want people to know, this is not a moral conversation, right? There's no good, bad, shouldn't, shame at all. This is really just looking at, we're devoted to you thriving and to fully bringing your unique gift to this world. And so, looking at how we can support you in understanding your body and helping your body better express health, that's what this conversation is about.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that and highlighting this point as well. I think we covered a lot of points and information. This episode will give our viewers and listeners the foundation when it comes to functional medicine, how it deals with a health condition like diabetes or maybe heart disease. And you shared a lot of information. They are very helpful. You covered weight gain and hormones as well. But I have got another question before we finish this episode. What inspiring message or advice would you like to leave with our viewers and listeners to motivate or help them on their health journey?
Well, what I would say, Gamden, is I really invite each and every one of you to envision what it would be like for you to have this area of your life handled, right? Like actually take a moment to envision a 5-year future where you are thriving physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, how in every way. What would it be like for you to move about the world with this vision of vitality? What is your vision of vitality is really what we're stepping into. So I invite you to take a moment to really contemplate that and even maybe write a little bit down about what it would be like for you to move about the world thriving in this 5-year future. And the reason why I see this as so important is that when we're really deeply connected to our own unique why, it changes things. It begins to be like our North Star pulling us forward. So my invitation is for each and every one of you listening to take a moment and envision and take some notes, write down what it will be like for you in 5 years to be thriving and moving about the world in your life.
Brilliant. That is a powerful, inspiring message. Thank you for sharing that. Where can people reach you or learn more about you or your work?
Yeah, you can find me at Well Empowered, EMPOWERED, wellempowered.com. And please feel free to schedule a complimentary consultation, whether you're interested in working together or you just like to chat and have some questions about the conversation podcast you listen to. I am here to serve. So it really would be a pleasure to connect with anyone who feels called to do so. You can also go to wellempowered.com /dare. And at wellempowered.com /dare, you can register to receive our weekly dares. So we actually send out every Sunday a dare that's a micro habit. So it's a small little shift to take on for the week ahead, an invitation to take on a small shift and just notice what your experience is with taking on this small little micro habit. So, and then lastly, you can find me on Instagram at Well Empowered.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing your contact information. And I think subscribing to your newsletter is going to be helpful. Imagine getting just one tip a week or an action you need to take every week, small action that is going to build up over time, and you will turn them into a habit. And sometimes we struggle to implement some things that we know we should do it, but how we turn it into a habit that sustain for like a long time. That is very helpful. I encourage you to join her newsletter for weekly tips and support as well. That brings us to the end of this episode. A big thank to our guest, Dr. Jessie, for sharing her expertise, and to all of you for turning in. If you need additional guidance, you can visit wellnessimpact.org. If you found today's episode valuable, I invite you to join our thriving community and subscribe or follow us for more insights and tips. Thanks again, Dr. Jessie, and thank you everyone for being a part of this journey. Until next time, take care of your health and keep thriving.